Yeah.
Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom here with this week's Next TMT Talks. This week's flagship podcast, we will talk about SpaceX and DirecTV preparing to pick over Dish Network's assets. More thoughts on Comcast's planned split announced early in the week and lost in the middle of all that 4th of July celebrating or non-celebrating, while Peacock is now a channel aggregator for all the big boys, just like all the big boys, but with all the big boys too. Everything in sports is getting watched, like a lot more. So we're going to talk about what gives. Also, Dan has remorse over his comic picking talents, while a new home for late night entertainment emerges. Finally, Sony ends the days of physical discs, at least in the game business. While The Onion has a decidedly different and highly amusing take on InfoWars, the not very amusing conspirator site now almost in their grasp. So, Dan, let's
Yep.
talk SpaceX, DirecTV, Dish Networks. This is a slow-moving train wreck, feels like. Been unfolding for months and months. You've written quite a lot about it over the many ensuing weeks, but now we're at feels like a close to or actually at a big new step,
Every time I
right?
think we've summited this, a big new summit on the horizon.
This is like walking through the Rockies. There's another mountain. Oh, there's another mountain. Oh, look, there's another mountain. Kind of like that.
So Charlie Ergen's Inglewood, Colorado empire, which encompasses
Speaking of the Rockies, yeah.
satellite TV, virtual pay TV, Sling TV. For a while, he was going to build America's fourth 5G wireless network. Bought a lot of spectrum, spent tens of billions of dollars on it. Got pretty far along with a 5G network. Got indebted to a bunch of infrastructure vendors, tower vendors, etc. Was moving slow, hoarding a lot of spectrum. The FCC under Brendan Carr moved him along and said, hey, either sell that spectrum or
Use it or lose it, right?
lose
But
it.
it turns out Charlie's a hoarder. Who knew? He's probably got like some, I don't know, random cable operator tucked away in the back office in Englewood or something.
So he sold much of that spectrum to SpaceX and Elon Musk and AT&T. You may recall last September, August, for, I think he got $42 billion in change. And that was supposed to take care of all the debt, settle with all the people he owed money to for the network. They would get out of the 5G network game, and their new play would be to use Boost Mobile, something they acquired from T-Mobile back in the day.
That was the prepaid, low costs.
Right. Anyway, it would be a partner with Musk's Starlink on direct-to-device satellite communication. They would sell it. They would package it within Boost. They would provide terrestrial reach for Starlink through Boost and using leased AT&T network space. They'd be out of the 5G network game. Well, they spent so much time haggling with their contractors and vendors on the failed network that the $42 billion hasn't hit their bank account yet. And they owe $2 billion, and they were getting red notices, so they had to pay it. So this week they declared bankruptcy on Dish 5G or Dish Wireless.
Chapter 11, it's worth 90711, which is reorganization and more court filings to come. Boy.
Yeah, the pay TV business too, which was, hemorrhaging subscribers, is also being restructured. What's interesting about it is on the wireless side, it shields Dish from paying all sorts of money. They're paying, dimes on dollars to the wireless tower vendors that they owe, and if they pay at all. And on pay TV, it sort of streamlines the debt and makes it easier for that long discussed marriage between DirecTV and Dish to happen. So it's one step along kind of a simplified vision for Dish, or EchoStar, whatever you want to call it, that's not as ambitious as it was. They were going to be a big wireless company. Now they're going to be kind of a subordinate to Elon Musk. And who knows if they'll own their pay TV business much longer. Dish.
Well, it's interesting to think about. I mean, you say it paves the way potentially for that long talked about merger, just like Sirius and XM did 15 years ago on the satellite radio side. This has always been like, well, this is the next domino to fall, and it never fell, but it probably should have, as all these other ways to get video started popping up, right?
Well, if the thing you learn about covering American capitalism for any length of time is that if you roll up a lot of debt, even if you get the money to pay it back, you don't have to. Not all of it. It's demoralizing. I mean, I don't know what EchoStar is going to do next, but some people are going to walk away not whole, and it is not right. It is not fair, David. But speaking of big corporate entities, and you and I were talking about this right before we embarked on this latest episode. We work for trade organizations that talk about, well, we cover the technology and the business, but we don't get bogged down in the stock machinations. We leave the Wall Street coverage for the finance publications. And how silly that is when you get into this milieu, especially if you look at an organism like Comcast this week.
Right. I feel like it's not even silly. It's denuded of sense, because what are the motivations for taking a perfectly adequate company? It's not doing as great in the market as it maybe could, but it makes a little money over here, makes a little money over there. It's got the parks, it's got these different things. Peacock isn't doing what it should be doing, but it's picking up some steam, as we talk about in this week's flagship, newsletter. So you don't have to split it, except we could make more money as divorcees out on the town, going out on wild dates with all kinds of cool new companies that are much cuter than the one we've been with for the last 13 years.
What happened to that meet cute back in 2009 where, they made 30 Rock was themed around it. Cabletown was getting married to the network and everything. And I guess.
Remember, it was a two-step marriage. So it was 2011 deal, 51% goes through, and they have a partnership. GE, noted broadcaster, GE, Jack Welch, and one of his many.
Yeah.
I want to Jack Webb and dun or something like that from Police Story or something.
I would the rap in the formative months when Sharon Waxman broke that story. I kind of solidified the rap as an entity, an entity nobody liked, but an entity nonetheless.
Well, I think they were fine with the entity. It might be the entity manager / owner, but that's just a separate issue.
Hell of a scoop.
But 2011, the first part of this deal closes. 2013, the second part, the balance was bought out, so GE could go off and do more financial engineering. By the way, 10 years ago, or 10 years later, they would go and split into 3 companies, none of which included broadcasting or media of any kind. And I think all 3 of them, at least 2 of them, are hugely popular. But be that as it may, it's all financial management, financial engineering. And now we're at this stage where Brian Roberts, who's done okay financially, is talking about splitting off still more of the entertainment assets. Already sent Versant out on a nice flow. They think they're doing fine. They're like light and nimble and cable networks, and all's good because they're generating some cash still. And we'll see where that is in 5 years, or who owns them, or what they're doing, or if they look like Dish. Are they going to be Dish? And now we've got NBC and all the Universal Studios and TV production and Universal Parks, and also Sky in Europe, the Zaccaster and significant content provider in Europe, all heading out. So that's a lot.
Don't fall. So maybe we can explain some of the machinations that make this palatable or desirable. That's the better word. I know within communications, it's a real challenging business for Brian Roberts right now. You've got connectivity, I should say.
Connectivity is a better way to put it, I think.
Fixed wireless access rocked their world a few years ago. Now you have Elon Musk and Starlink. There's fiber can't be understated. There's a lot of competition in home broadband.
They're getting nibbled from a lot of directions. In several, they diversified into several things, first of all, but everybody else diversified back, and they're getting stuff nicked out all over. So their original castle has taken a few catapult blows
on the connectivity side. So they're while they're being nipped at in home broadband, they're trying to get into wireless with this upstart Xfinity Mobile, which has been pretty successful. Went over 10,000 or 10 million lines recently. It gets more customer additions every month than all the big 3 wireless companies. it would seem like this, being detached from media would make M&A a little easier. Maybe that's a core reason.
I don't know. M&A doesn't have to be easier unless it's about being acquired. Because otherwise you just do the deal, right? You're big enough, you just do the deal. Now, the thing is, there are different kinds of businesses. So the connectivity is very capital expenditure intensive, because
Right.
you're having to run lines, and you're having to connect up all the communication systems, real hard, this, heavy asset stuff. Exactly. And then run stores to talk to people, or, all that stuff. And then the media stuff, it costs you a little bit to make make a TV show or whatever, but then you have it. It's in your library for the next 100 years, and you can chop it up in different ways and do things with it. And it's something. And sometimes it's a flop. And then sometimes people decide it was a flop then, but it's not so much of a flop now, for instance. But you don't have the same capital expenditures up front. So it's a very different business. And I think that's part of it in terms of how you value
As
the
an
different parts of
aside,
the business and put them together.
I think I understand just in the way there's certain dudes who like to be cops and first responders. Wearing a hard hat and driving a cable van would be its own kind of charge. You show up, you get your tool belt. The hard hat says, "Hey, I got priority access here. Cable connectivity construction's happening."
I'm giving you internet, so let me in, right?
Yeah, there's a command presence that's required for that job. Anyway, go ahead.
Right. Anyway, but I mean, they're different businesses, and so in terms of trying to value the overall company, it complicates the assessment. The sum of the parts isn't considered to be as large as the individual pieces, and maybe you want to maximize that because that's like one of those basic tenets of capitalism. But you don't have to. They just do. So now they're gonna, after believing in the past. I mean, part of this is the evolving vision of what you should be. So for a while there, we had companies doing a whole bunch of things. They had the connectivity and they had the content. We're going to fill the pipes with our content, and that was the thing in the aughts and the 2010s, right?
Content is
And
king.
since then, yeah, content is king, but only if we own the pipes too. And now, with the exception of Fox and Roku, which arguably were too small by themselves to really go
Right.
bigger, but everybody else is like, okay, we've got all this, but it's not really, there's no synergy. Weird. There's no corporate synergy.
Right.
This is what we were talking about.
Cord cutting kind of went crazy after that thing closed. I mean, it might have been a very different story if Comcast.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fun to get a graphic of the timing on that, because like they made a deal and it made sense in 2010. Like cable
Right.
was still everything. But Netflix had only started streaming recently, like 2-3 years before that. Hulu, and they didn't have any originals. They were just renting everybody else's content. Hulu was just showing reruns that people had missed the first time it ran. There was no streaming presence. There was no option there. Cable dominated the business. The satellite providers, Dish and DirecTV, had a nice little business, but it wasn't a huge business. And then you had broadcast, which is like, who's got an over-the-air antenna? Yeah, some people, but
Just think about 2000, the timeline you just discussed a few minutes ago. Let's say 2013. People were talking about Netflix. You had an early kind of, the millennials were young and they were talking about cord cutting, but it was really a nascent thing. I mean, the world still
very
around pay TV, TV everywhere was still regarded as a legitimate way to sort of sustain that dominance. And
that was going to be the thing, but they weren't, like, none of the studios were really streaming original content, original movies, first run movies there. It would come out long afterward. It was a different time.
6:33 p.m.
Thank you, Siri. Siri just told me what time it was. It's getting so much smarter now. But it was a different time. But basically, the justification for putting things together just 13 years ago no longer exists.
right.
Right? It no longer makes sense to do that. And so all these companies are trying to figure out, what's the new plan? What's the new rule book? We don't know, but let's do it this way. Maybe the street will let us make more money this way. So that's what they're doing. Now, I think,
How can
and
you
this is
not
what's
be
important.
romantic about capitalism, Dave?
Well, I am, and deep in my heart, but I'm different that way. But I think all the hot takes that blew up this week as people desperately tried to fill airtime on a long holiday weekend all those hot takes are way premature. The guys at Comcast are saying, neither new company will be an acquisition target. That's not what's happening. Maybe the entertainment side's going to go and do some deals. They kind of hinted, but they weren't that explicit. But no one's buying us, that kind of thing. And Brian Roberts has a choice. He'll continue to have like a 33% or 30% controlling share of these companies, as he still does with Versant. But it's hard to believe Mike Cavanaugh, who will be the head of the entertainment side and is now the co-CEO of the combined company, just in January said there's no strategic advantage to breaking them up. And now he's saying, well, we changed your mind. He said, we just simply changed our mind. It's like, okay, 5 months will do that to you. Also, an $800 million payout to David Zaslav might make you think, there could be an upside there for me.
Yeah,
I'll look at that.
Abrupt if you're an investor.
That's how.
It's like what you just said is different from what you
About thanks for March.
Yeah. That's I didn't realize that happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty bald. We'll just say that. And so again, Kavanaugh could just change his mind again because that's how boys are. You can't trust them. So we'll see where that goes. But they think it's going to take a year to go through the process. That doesn't necessarily take into account what Brendan Carr monkey wrenching might come along in all of this, just because Don Trump hates B. Roberts. So we'll see with that.
Well,
and then depending on the structure.
He wants to influence control over NBC Universal. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess
so they may or may not be able to do that. So
as a standalone entity, by breaking them off from the technology side, and I realize what you just said, and I read some analyst reports saying they're a buyer, not a seller.
For now, tweak.
Right. Might there be someone right of the spectrum that takes advantage of the regulatory climate and tries to get that asset now? Because if you wanted to do that and you had that ideological agenda, now would seem to be a pretty good time.
If you have the spare dosh, the real question then becomes, okay, who? So the usual
bunch of private equity.
Chris Reddy and a bunch of Saudis, maybe.
Right.
Or one of the other random public investment funds over there, because clearly that doesn't matter to the Trump administration. Any friend of MBS in Saudi Arabia is a friend of ours, particularly any friend of Jared's.
Anybody who's a friend of MAGA who could come up with the money to buy a media conglomerate could have it.
Sure.
I don't know that.
Or enough money. That's probably true. Absolutely. So would that be Miriam Edelman, who owns the Sands Venetian Hotel and that whole, gambling company, want to do a Kirk Kerkorian and buy a content company to go with the Venetian and
the late Sheldon Adelson?
Sheldon's widow. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they bankrolled a bunch of Trump stuff and, they bought the Dallas Mavericks NBA team, for instance. So,
right.
For instance, from Mark Cuban.
Elon Musk has spare cash. Maybe he wants a programming app for his burgeoning telecom. Vertical integration.
Yeah. It's already got a whole bunch of parts that just don't necessarily go together. He's already announced 2 acquisitions, a small one for, I think, an optics company that involved a bunch of SpaceX employees, and that was like $1.5 billion. But the big one is $60 billion for Cursor, an AI company that he hopes can make Grok actually matter.
Right.
Which is unlikely. But maybe getting like actual real content as opposed to Nazi conspiracy theorists contributing to your AI would make it smarter. Maybe. Or not.
Yeah,
you can see.
I mean, I don't know if I haven't looked at the valuation recently. It was on the way down last time I did look to a less stratospheric level. But
yeah, it's down in the 150s.
When he bought Cursor,
it was definitely a parabola.
his sheer size was making the price go down after I bought it. It was staggering
Yeah.
economics. Again,
Yeah.
how can you not be romantic about it? So
Lots of pictures of rocket launches. That's all I can say about their pitch. Lots of
Yeah.
pictures.
there was an interesting Peacock related thing. I think I told you about it. This week they signed an agreement to be kind of like a channel vendors of stars. And so
They're doing the Amazon channel thing, man. This is the new. You want to talk about trends? It's like breaking up, and we'll gather together everybody else's stuff and make it easy for you to buy it through us, as opposed to one of those other guys, right?
it's just
These are like the
stars, but
fourth or fifth ones to do it.
yeah, it's just stars at this point. Meaning if you sign up for the Stars app through Peacock, you pay for the Stars app through
Sure.
Peacock. The Stars app gets disaggregated through the Peacock app, meaning the content gets subsumed or sublimated or absorbed. I don't forget what the word is, but it's you watch. The whole thing is dictated by the Peacock app. All the data, everything gets recouped by NBC Universal. The analysts love this stuff. I mean, I know Rich Greenfield, whose blog you and I both read kind of religiously, talked about how it kind of fits in line with a bunch of smart things they've been doing with their app in terms of verticals and micro dramas and creating sort of
Yeah.
destination places.
We'll see if the verticals pay off when it becomes big media company bolts on a vertical drama unit that's mostly self-promotion versus, I mean, they're doing some stuff with like unscripted programming on a couple of shows that are originals. So maybe that'll find an audience. Bravo certainly knows how to do unscripted, right?
So
So
yeah,
we'll
we
see.
just talk about just in terms of their app kind of being evaluated away from like, subscriber count and content of the platform, just the sort of execution of the technology. Conversely, he deemed Zumo, the joint venture between Comcast and Charter.
Jumo. We should say it's Jumo, like it's Spanish.
No, not in this case, Dave. I'm sorry.
Like Javier.
Be going to Western Europe in a
Zumo.
couple of months, and you can just let it all hang out. But for now, it's and
It's
it
Zumo with an X. Zumo with an X. I like
right.
that one. It's
y-
it's
y-
actually a malted beverage.
Rich Greenfield and Lightshed deemed it a failure. I don't know if you can do that because it's sort of the backbone of Charter's big pay TV strategy.
Seems premature.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
It's like, okay, so it's not like a big thing, but it's like a partnership, and it takes care of putting, instead of an Apple TV box, which is what I got from Charter when we subscribed to Charter 8-9 years ago. Perfectly good 4K Apple TV box, which is good. They got their own with the X1 stuff, which is very well regarded and Comcast very proud of. And they've got a shared thing to keep the cost down. So that's across all their different stuff.
it hasn't
So it's a
turned into
failure,
like
but
it was supposed to be a big tvOS rival to Roku and
yeah.
Amazon and Google a few years ago.
Plus it's got the whole fast component. That's where Jumo first was.
Right.
First was, it was a fast in the early fast days. That's all I'm saying. And it's still got that component too. So it's got, this is like Apple naming things, or Google. They just keep using the same names over and over again, and you have no idea what they're talking about. So Zumo is a joint venture. It is an operating system with Comcast technology. It is a box using the Comcast technology, but an operating system and a fast network like the Roku channel, right? That's really everything, right?
It turned into kind of a skinny client operating system for cable companies. And I think it has succeeded as that. And if you put its failure on that benchmark, I don't think it's an apt description. As a broader kind of out of footprint consumer play, no, it hasn't caught on. So, yeah, like you said, it's
But the question is, does it need to catch on outside of Charter, Comcast, and now the Cox acquisition that Charter's doing? Those are three of the four biggest, or the top three biggest cable providers, what's left of the cable business in America, right? So if they're all using it on all their new customers, or at least those who don't want to use an existing Roku or Apple TV or whatever, that feels like that's just a thing. It's okay. It's a nice little business, but not a big business. They don't need to talk everybody else into using it. They could. It's not going to be Roku because it's the in-house solution. So
I livened up my July 4th by watching an old variety basketball colleague, Ben Gleberman, Glebe now by stage. I watched his new.
Did he lose the ERMAN? It's just Glebe now, but he was Gleberman,
It's always been
like
Glebe.
the movie critic.
He was just
Oh.
out of UC San Diego. He had won his big project to graduate, got purchased by National Lampoon. So somebody recognized his talent early. He would show up with his man.
Did UC San Diego, a fine university, by the way, with great biomedical stuff, have a program in stand-up comedy?
I don't know, but the kid was living in the LA area, playing basketball with us at a junior high in the North Valley every Tuesday night. He was dedicated, tall, reasonably athletic. I was in my late 30s, going on my 40s, starting a gradual thickening process.
And shortening. You used to be 6'8". Now, not so much.
I wasn't 6'8", but I have climbed down a few inches. And it was a tough thing guarding. And I don't know if this influenced me or not, but he did not make, in those days, I was the big gatekeeper for Variety's 10 comics to watch, which actually had a lot of juice. And we made some good picks. Some of them you recognize. I won't go through it. But we ended up choosing a John LaJoy, who ended up on the FX series. It was about fantasy, the league. It was about fantasy sports. These guys were like middle-aged guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He did a pretty good job.
I remember the show.
He was like a musical guitar guy who would break out into song, and Mark Duplass was on the show, and it did pretty well. So he ended up making a name.
Let me just say, anywhere the Duplass brothers go, I'm down for a trip, because those boys know how to make good shows.
That was kind of his peak.
Okay.
Whereas Ben toiled in clubs, did all sorts of late night hosting side roles. He was with Chelsea Handler for a while, and James Corden. I don't think he was guest hosting, but he was a panelist on Chelsea for a while, and a bunch of stuff on cable, sketch stuff, lots of stand up, and just through the.
This is kind of a classic grind for way too many stand-up comedians. Even now with, Netflix is a joke, showcases and, everybody doing those hour-long specials with people you've never heard of, but they're getting them, right? But it's still a grind. If you're trying to do that stuff, man, you're going to the local Chuckle Hut, for 4 years just to get a 5
feature. Celebrity, but he paid his dues, and he was enough of a celebrity that you'd see him on basic cable. I saw his social stuff. He was around. He kept with it, made a lot of friends, and you watch him now. I see him on Instagram and everything. His videos surface, and it takes a long time to be good at stand-up comedy. I know people who approach it from a hobbyist thing. They put on their tight jeans and their tight T-shirt, their leather jacket. Hey, I'm a stand-up. You're not. You have to really pay your dues for that, it seems like.
They are standing, and they're telling jokes, probably poorly, but they are not a stand-up. It is a different thing. I had a colleague from my days at the Riverside paper who quit journalism to go into a real business, i.e. stand-up. And Rob was a funny guy in a very dry, almost academically oriented way. And he started writing jokes. He was writing for like a beach weekly, newspaper down in Redondo Beach. But then he would hit all the open mics, right? And so I would go with him just to kind of cheer him on. And so I got to see some of that business at that gritty level. And the difference between the guy who's 6 months in versus the woman who's been at it for 4 or 5 years and literally can punch through this invisible membrane that sort of insulates the audience from the performer. They can punch through and get them going and get them. It's really interesting to see that work its way out, but it takes time to be able to learn how to do that, to pace the jokes. But he was doing jokes about the Black Death and the Magna Carta and ballerinas, and it was like pretty funny stuff. But boy, a very specific audience.
I think it's one thing to master with Jamie Masada as the Comedy Store, the long-time LA kind of center of comic heat.
Temple of comedy. Yeah. It's one of the high.
Takes a long time, a lot of dues to get to that skill set. Not just anyway, Ben He does this now weekly thing. He's done it since the end of May, funded by Scott Galloway, one of the hot female comedians, I forgot her name, and some venture capitalists. He's got about 100.
Just to clarify, Scott Galloway, an NYU Stern professor and omnipresent podcaster, is not a female podcaster. Scott's pretty cool, though. It's cool that he's got his money. Scott talks about all the investing he did in media companies in the great financial crisis, and those shares went.
Yeah, let me
just an aside.
Finish real fast. So the guy turned himself, I think, into one of the few people who can do that job, late night host. At the same time that
there's no late night hosting jobs left. Good timing on that, Ben.
Man,
your visibility is amazing on this.
In the space where it is most vibrant, which is YouTube. Like Kimmel, Colbert, their most consumed platform probably was YouTube. So Ben is going native on it. He's got a showrunner who worked for The Daily Show, who I think had a couple of the late night stops too. He's got the drummer for Black Eyed Peas as his band leader. It's shot out of his house. It has a kind of do-it-yourself feel at the same time. It feels like made by people who really know what they're doing. And he's got...
Right. Conan O'Brien's done some of this in his post-network business. So there's definitely space here. It's interesting to think about, the alleged problem with Colbert was they were spending $100 million a year. Well, we can dismiss it, but we can also say it's possible they weren't generating as much as they needed to cover like his $20 million a year contract, which we know is true. And Ben probably doesn't have a $20 million a year contract.
It wasn't even a renegotiation, according to Steve Colbert. I mean, there was no attempt to bring him back in a veteran's minimum contract. They just wanted...
Yeah. He was going to get the mid-level exception like the NBA. I could just see, because he, like Ben Glebe, can hit the turnaround J.
Ben Glebe isn't the only one doing this, but I thought it's a remarkable effort. I didn't love the monologue. I've seen some of his stand-up stuff. It's really fantastic. I think they're still working that part out of the show. They did some skits that I thought were really funny when involved Jay Leno, both in real life and kind of VR created through a bit and a wig, but or AI, I should say. But I found the whole show, and the episode, that was a recent one that was dropped a few days ago, has Mark Duplass as a guest. And he's kind of the inventor of the micro-budget feature through the puffy chair 20 years ago.
Yeah. He and his brother did that whole mumblecore movement, and they'd spend a couple $100,000 on a film and find enough of an audience to do the next $210,000 film, et cetera, et cetera. And these days they write, produce, direct. They mentor a bunch of other artists. They have a little compound here in Los Angeles, or did.
And Mark was in...
He did a zillion things. He and Jay are both in a ton, but yes. Yeah, he was in Backrooms. So.
I liked the back and forth. They kind of paid reference to the talk show and how little, revenue it generates at this point. He can...
Not that we know anything about that, but just saying.
No, it's a good creator discussion, and I like what Duplass said right off the middle. We don't know everything, but he claims they know everything. But the only thing we do know at this point is there's going to be a lot of kind of copycat shit, micro budget films that started out as YouTube memes. We'll see that shortly. And let that cavalcade unfold, man. Just stay out of the way as they charge forward. Speaking of interesting online comedy, The Onion is just about, not quite, taken over InfoWars. Alex Jones, the frothing Alex Jones is, God, just listening to that guy. It's like, why does his head not just go, but Jones lost control over it when he lost this massive lawsuit from the traumatized parents of the slaughtered children of Sandy Hook Elementary School. They filed suit. They won a big judgment. And despite all the legal maneuvers that Jones keeps trying in a sympathetic court system in Texas, shall we say, I think at some point they're going to fully get control. They will license to The Onion, the parody site out of the upper Midwest. And they've already launched a parody site called The Real InfoWars that makes fun of all this stuff. And it's fantastic that they're doing something with what was such an egregious abuse of the many, many wonderful things the First Amendment allows. Of all the bullshit causes to just stake your claim on and fight to the bitter end and just lose everything. Just denigrating bereaved parents who lost their children in the most grisly circumstances. I don't know if you
Yeah.
can make that up. I mean, it's just awful. I don't know.
He may have been a little loose on his connections with reality. Maybe. Possibly.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theorists tend to be that way. That being said, this might be a better use for it. I hope it goes well for The Onion, which has reliably made me laugh about things that are meant to parody reality, but unfortunately sometimes become reality. It's
Right.
like that joke they made in 2003. All of a sudden, holy crap, that was just crystal ball. That wasn't a joke anymore. Now it's here. They kind of do that. So we'll see where they go with this. But they're going to be making fun of the whole conspiracy theorist stuff.
Now, what's his name? The
in
guy
general.
who like mimics Alex Jones, the comedian Tim Heidecker. Is
That is one of the people involved. Yes.
a few months ago, and they said we've taken over InfoWars. I'll be your guy now. But they had to like
They-
stop and desist.
Yeah. A random friendly judge. It's amazing how many friendly judges there are in Texas for certain causes, like Brendan Sorsby needing time to play football for the Texas Tech. But a judge said the bid process was improperly handled. It needs to be redone. Things like that. So they redid it. And now it's a separate appeal. It's in the Texas Appeals Court level, which is politically elected judiciary, by the way. They run for office and depend on contributions. Not that there's ever any conflicts of interest when that happens, ever.
Have you seen
So-
Larry David's latest HBO series?
I think you may recall, I may not be Larry David's biggest fan.
So you didn't watch it? Okay.
I am very happy to see Larry David's latest disappear from the face of the earth. So none of the stuff he does it for me. And I truly grant, I completely grant, look, he's had enormous success. Go with God, Larry. I hope it continues for you. Never worked for me. His glitchy cringe humor is like, it's not my thing. I wasn't really into Seinfeld. I had other things to do on Thursday nights in the 90s as a young divorced father with my kids only a couple of nights a week, and the whole tech entertainment world blowing up on the other days. I didn't sit at home and watch Seinfeld, and my life felt pretty full anyway.
Yeah.
And it's been that way ever since. Just saying.
My friends and me used to go to this Mexican restaurant in Canoga Park. Had these it took quarters, and you could watch Seinfeld on Thursday night just by paying like $0.75. Never left it.
I don't know that I would have paid that much.
Anyway, on his latest series, it's reenactments of sort of historical events through
Right.
the Larry David lens, and they've got Bob Reiner in his last role playing George Washington, telling the court that he's not going to take a third term because he doesn't want to, be seen as power craven and thinks that this is what you do in a democracy. And
It doesn't want to be a king.
this should set a template for all presidents in the future to avoid, conflicts of interest and power. And Larry David's, well, what if you have an asshole who's a narcissist and he doesn't care about the Constitution? Anyway, special appearance by Jimmy Kimmel. It's quite good, quite funny. But
I'm glad you enjoy it. It will remain opaque to me. Speaking of things that are suddenly opaque, you spent years writing about home entertainment. It is a business that has been in a decline, I think, really ever since you left. $16 billion in 2005 in revenues for hard physical copies of home entertainment discs, DVDs, Blu-rays, etc. It's down to a couple billion. Sony just took their last remaining factory in Germany and turned it into a micro-optics factory for like car stuff and things.
Yeah.
They're not making game discs of their own anymore, which finally explains why when Grand Theft Auto 6 said, yeah, we'll sell a physical copy. It'll be a box with a slip of paper with a download code in it and for $80, or if you want to do the high-end version, $100. And people basically lost their stuff, we'll just say the nice word, over that. Now we know why they didn't explain why they were doing that, because Sony isn't making those discs anymore. And they're like, okay, we're just going to do a little slip of paper and it's going to be almost the same and nearly as awesome. But like what's going to, the Steelbook business, which was for fanboys wanting the definitive version of Avatar 3. That's just not going to be a thing in a couple of years. I guarantee it.
Well, I mean, it starting with the Laserdisc in, I guess, the early 80s, or was that late 70s?
I think that, well, I thought it was later than that,
The
but
compact
okay.
disc, which was a big deal, through the DVD and on through Blu-ray, HD, DVD. We were so, each iteration was the future that would like future-proof your library. Collect this and you will be set for the rest of your life, consumer. And each time you had like a 4 or 5 year, maybe less window before obsolescence set in. I've got boxes and boxes of discs that I've never touched. I can't.
Head to amoeba, brother, and reclaim acres of, or not acres, but cubic yards of space in your life. Just throwing that out there.
When I covered home entertainment, and that was like a big no-no at Variety, you could get fired for doing that. You could buy award shows and create and proper vertical integration, but don't sell your disc and try to
or write a script and try and sell it to a studio unless your name is Peter Bart, right? Wow. Rules are for suckers, It's like debt. You have to pay back your debt. You get a big enough number and no one has to pay it back. Somebody else's problem. But that being said,
that's the lesson.
That being said, the game business is changing dramatically, walking away. Sony also told folks that it might kill off 551 copies of 551 movies it gets from Canal Plus, because they're in a dispute with Canal Plus, and that's not resolved before September 1. All those things that those people thought they had paid for, all they paid for was the right to be able to watch an electronic version of it on their PlayStation, and poof, just go away. That's how it works. It's not really a purchase. It's a long-term rental, period. Don't forget that, kids. But things they can't take away from us, apparently watching live sports. We'll wrap this puppy up with this one. It's crazy. It's not just World Cup. Sure, people are watching lots of World Cup. Fox, Telemundo for NBCU, Peacock are doing very, very, very well. Great. And of course, FIFA's doing well. Game was delayed last I looked before we began this here podcast. It was delayed. They're playing England, which will be
right. It started
a tough nut.
1:00 in the morning local London time, right?
Yeah, but it got pushed because of thunderstorms. But I mean, El Tri is playing at home again. Basically, they're in Estadio Azteca in Mexico City in the FA, and that is a serious home court advantage, let me tell you. So we'll see what the English guys do. They've got some good players like the beloved Harry Kane, who's now written his name in the history of English, the tortured history of English soccer since 1966, the last time they won the World Cup. That being said, 60 years later, FIFA's doing great. Fine. Fantastic. All these other sports are getting like crazy ratings now. The NBA had the best ratings in 20 odd years. No, since 98. 2 golf tournaments, for God's sakes, had their best ratings in like 20 years. Last weekend, NBC Sports put out. And the Red Sox-Yankees game, clearly the most watched rivalry in baseball. But Sunday Night Baseball had its best ratings in 15 years. And the Yankees and Red Sox really aren't that good right now.
No.
They're okay, but they're not good. And the best ratings in 15 years. I'm wondering if it's a problem with measurement. That'd be shocking, right? Or if it's just everybody's like, well, there's nothing else to watch. Let's watch the game. Whatever the game is, we'll watch the game. I'll watch Nelly Corda and LPGA stuff because Nelly kind of rocks, actually. But still, they're all setting records. It's not just World Cup every 4 years with, completely insane Mexican national team fans, which there are a couple, I'll admit. Well, I'm hearing somebody cheering, so I'm guessing somebody scored. So anyway,
that's weird.
What do you think? What do you think's driving all the viewership? Any thoughts?
Well, it's interesting you say when you get into how ephemeral Nielsen's sausage making is, and how small changes can create sort of very big variances in the end result. I wonder if you're onto something with measurement. Two, I think culturally, it just might be one of the places we in. I mean, I remember just watching the fervor around youth sports when my family was involved with it. It seemed like just over the 8-year span that we spent in the cycle raising our kids through it, it got pretty intense pretty fast. So maybe it's part society. I don't know, man. It's bigger than you and me, Dave. It's big. You're booted. What happened?
Dave, you and me write about things that are bigger than you and me because, like, you write about Ben Glebe, who was bigger than you and had a better turnaround jumper. So what can we say?
Yeah, I never did perfect that shot. So anyway, wind us out of here, big guy. Let's
finish the newsletter. That. Not
as much fun.
Trying to, yeah. Not
Especially.
Glad to be back at it. That's all I can say. And folks, if you want to read our newsletter, our twice a week newsletter, go to Next TMT as in media text. Go to Next Technology, Media, and Telecom, nexttmt.com to get our newsletter free. You can also go to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts to get the audio and or video versions of this here podcast, which comes out also twice a week. And you can like, share, subscribe, comment. Please share. Please comment. We love comments. We are so happy to have folks involved in our little media venture or sprawling media empire such as it is right now. And glad to have you along. With that, this is David Bloom with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, saying thank you, over and out. By the way, it's 2-1 England with